Why don't we want web as a corpus? Go back to your notes, don't stare at me.
You don't know where the information comes from, or
Very
how
good.
the search engines provide
Yes.
it?
Yes, one thing, we don't know the authors. We don't know the authors, and then, for example, Wikipedia, right? We talk about Wikipedia. Why can't we just, okay, depending on the purpose, let's say depending on the purpose, but if we see web as one purpose, the problem is we don't know who the authors are. And nowadays it's even worse. You don't know whether they are authentically created by human beings or by AI. Then can you really use those as authentic texts? It's problematic, yes. Anything else? Anything else related to why don't we want to use a web as a corpora, as a corpus?
The quality of the web.
The quality of the text are not consistent, right? We don't really know. We don't really know how good or whether they are really. I think because from week one, you understand that when we collect a corpus, it needs to be collected in a principled way. So if we just scrape things directly from the whole web, I think that's too much. Okay, now, we talk about 2 reasons. Now, how to make it acceptable, how to make it okay to use the information, the text on the internet. How to make it okay, how to make it acceptable. Clean the data. Okay, before that, yes, once we collect it, we need to clean, but that can also be applied to web as a corpus, right? You can collect all of them and then you clean them. So that's possible. So how to make it okay? How to make it acceptable? So the first thing you need to know is what you need to collect. What's the purpose of collecting the corpus? Right, that's the first thing you need to know. So to answer your research questions or to teach for a class, you want to gather data, you want to gather materials, then you start collecting the corpus. Remember we talked about population and a sample, right? We define our population, so that will be the purpose. Then let's say, I want to find, I need text. So let's say, remember the activity that we did for the first class, second class, I think, is about a business communication corpus, right? So we already define that. And then we say, we want emails, we want phone communication, things like that. So you define them, and then you look for them online. Okay, so that will be the starting point. And then after you collect it, yes, you need to clean the corpus. You probably want to annotate the corpus. You maybe want to delete the duplicates. All these things will happen after. That's called text processing. Once you have the data. But I think the question from the beginning was how to make it appropriate. And remember we said that we need to be clear about the corpus description. So let's say you want to collect L2 learners corpus. Fine. Can you really find L2 writing online? Probably not. Because no one will say, I'm an L2 learner of English. This is what I wrote in my blog. That's it. No one would ever say that. Even you see, for example, a Chinese name, you cannot even assume this person is really Chinese or probably the person was born in the United States. Who knows? No one knows. If the author did not reveal himself or herself, then we don't know. Okay. So last week was about that. And then we saw a lot of trends, right? Trends about the corpus studies. Okay. For that, I want you to, I think the result is interesting. For example, we saw more spoken corpora are being used, increasing trend. And then also, but I remember like in the article 1, representativeness is still important. We need to be aware of the representativeness. Okay, so when you collect the data, when you collect a corpus, I will say it can be small, it's okay. But how are you going to define it? I think that would be the problem, or that would be the more the concern. Okay. So that's the trend. And then if you are, I think in that paper, I really want you to look at what kind of Corpora they use. Okay, that might be something that you can work with for your final project. Okay, now for this class. For this class, we are going to talk about learner corpus, learner corpora. One step back. What is learner corpora?
Collection of the tests produced by the language learner.
Okay, language learners, right? Here, I think when we talk about this, first of all, well, do we talk about first language learners? We could, but then maybe we don't call it learner corpora. Okay, why? So there's one word here, interlanguage. What's this? I think you learned this word in SLA class. What is interlanguage? That's also written in the textbook.
Is it written text and spoken text that represent to interlanguage?
So we are talking about learners. So you need, when you search for the word, probably you need learners, language learners as well for interlanguage. Maybe they have different definition, I'm not sure. But we are talking about learners, language learners, interlanguage. Yes, but what's the characteristics of it? Why do we need a term, interlanguage, to talk about L2 learners? What's that for? Okay, introduction 13.1, first line. Learner corpora are corpora representing written or spoken interlanguage. That is, language produced by learners of that language. Then do we say, for example, what I'm speaking right now, is it interlanguage? Am I not speaking English? I am speaking English. So what's the interlanguage mean? Does that mean we have a second set of English that only non-native speakers talk about? No. If you go back to your SOA class, interlanguage means during language learners learning a new language, a foreign language, they may produce certain, for example, not real, it's authentic, but it's not correct, let's say. For example, oversimplified of past tense. So students may say, they don't say went, they say golden, right? Or happy, happier, and then beautiful, beautifuler. These are called interlanguage. They are produced particularly by learners. And then different stages, you may see different changes. Okay, so for example, until now, I still cannot figure out he or she. Like, my friend needs to correct me so many times, like they cannot figure out whether I'm talking about male or female. That happened. In the past, I said, I do it. My professor's like, did you do it? Is it already done? Yes, I said yes. I cannot figure out past tense in communication, spoken. Sometimes that happens. Maybe in writing, I'm more aware of it, but in speaking, it's just difficult because it doesn't exist in Chinese, in Mandarin. That's why. That's the interlanguage happening. Because you're learning, right? So yes, I'm speaking English, but I'm speaking, sometimes it's wrong, but then we don't really say, oh, it's wrong, because we still get communication go through. So if really I have a corpus collecting my first day of learning English and speaking English until now, then I can see, oh, there are so many mistakes has been corrected or, disappeared. And until now, I still have he or she, past tense, or some broken syntax, things like that. Okay, that's the interlanguage. Now, so here in this chapter, we mainly talk about second language or foreign language learning. learn the corpora. And then here, the chapter also said they differ from child language corpora, right? Like I mentioned earlier, the first language acquisition is the same. Some linguists, after they have a baby, they just start recording them until they are maybe 12 years old or something. 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-olds, and then they listen to them. So they're own spoken. They listen to them and see how they figure out how to pronounce certain sounds. That's also learn the corpora, but it's first language. So, but here in this chapter, we mainly talk about foreign language. Okay, I think that's a little bit different, but that's possible to do it. That's one. And then for kids, you don't really have. If you're the parent, you don't really need another consent form. You already consented. You already said, okay, let's do this. Okay. So, let's talk about, in this chapter, I think it's quite interesting to think about terms in different ways. So, as early as 1960s, people had started to collect corpora. And then until now, I think last week we read the trend, so you kind of understand things are, and especially with the technology, right now it's just easy to get a big corpus. Types of learner corpora. So for learners, we can collect these types of corpora. For example, written corpora. Think about maybe, for example, writing classes, right? If you learn language, you are in a writing class, or let's say you write diary, you write blogs, you write certain type of, I would say like travel notes, anything in a second language, we can collect that. Then that's called, okay. And here, interestingly, this one, International Corpus of Learner English, that's one corpus is available if you're interested. And then this is Spanish, okay. And then second one is the spoken corpora. Let's say if someone, well, probably from all my EMI courses, if I look at all of them, I have a spoken corpus for myself. Okay. And then, but so they, in your chapter, they always give you some examples, but maybe they're not, English and Chinese. So if you can read other languages, it's fine if you want to use them for your final project. And then longitudinal, so like we focus on certain subjects, we follow them for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, for a long period of time. That's longitudinal. And then so this one could be something you go to look at. Okay, I got this all from the textbook. Okay, so, however, there's something called, well, there's a concept issue with the word authenticity. Let's say if we just collect, let's say, CNN's news, right? We think it's authentic because that's what people read. But what about learners' production, learners' output of language, L2? Some people may say they are not authentic because in writing class, your teacher asks you to write something, right? But, I mean, is that going to be read by a lot of people? We don't know. Maybe not. And so it's being produced by request, right? So that's the learner context problem. Learner language is often produced in pedagogical settings rather than real, purely communicative purposes. So for example, at least right now I'm talking about the content. So this is in a more authentic way. However, I only talk to you in class in English for Taiwanese students, right? Then my English right now is just a part of my overall English. Or maybe my class English is better than my daily life English. It's possible too. Okay. Then, so in this case, then we have to compromise. We have to say, okay, this is what we can get from learners. Then no matter they are producing, I mean, even though they're producing in an educational context, it's okay. We get this, I check this word, like a part of it. At least we can get a part of it. Because no matter in what context, let's say we want to know whether students make certain mistakes throughout 3 years. If we just collect your writing for 3 years, probably we still can see that, right? Just by the essays that you write in class, for example. But when I collect writing corpus, written corpus, I cannot guarantee that you'll make the same mistakes or not. Because although these are both production, it's different, right? You understand? It's different. Okay. So therefore, we can only get a limited range of genres. Limited. What's happening in the educational system? For example, on this page, it says typically containing essays, academic writing, or narratives. This is what's happening in the class, right? Or this page here, for example, argumentative essays and role play, right? In class, when we do role play, then I can collect your spoken data. So it says, spontaneous conversations, for example, are more likely to happen in one's mother tongue. If you're going to have a chit-chat, unless you're talking to Mary, otherwise usually we'll just speaking Mandarin, then it's difficult for me to get your chit-chat, in English. Probably no way. Or if our context is in a country that's where people speak English as the official language, then probably we can find it. But here in Taiwan, then no, we only can get that in class. Okay. So authenticity was an issue, but then people just compromised. Okay. Now, then we talk about metadata, right? What is metadata? Do you remember? Metadata. So you know data. Metadata is the information about the data, the information. So data you think is information, but it's the information about the information. So information about the data. So we talked about corpus description, right? We say most of the research didn't write enough from last week, okay? But metadata is so important in learner corpus because we really need to know who are the learners here, right? Or, for example, we have the learner information and we have the text information. For example, what's the genre? What did they do? So these are the two things. Let me see. Oh, and then this one, how much time? Exposure, how much time? So we want to make sure that when you think about this, if we have learners of 3 months versus learners of 3 years, language learners of 3 years, they may produce same language but different level. If we don't have this information and then we just analyze them as one corpus, that will be very problematic because you won't be able to find same patterns, right? So that's why, remember there's a corpus called MICAS. Last time we see that they have L2, L1, L2, first, what's their first language, what's their level, CFR level kind of thing. That's that. Okay. So, and I would say that, for example, different L1 may also influence the use of second language too. So things get complicated when it's first language or second language. Okay. Page 286 under chapter 13.2.2. Here they give you like ICLE, IGNO. I don't think this is IGNO. This corpus gives you different L1, but they are all learning English on the bottom page. So I'm saying and they also provide enough learning information and text information for you. So if you're interested, you can look at. And it will be very interesting to look at Chinese as well. Like for your final project, you don't really need to be like, oh, I have to do it in English. I really don't think so. Last year, one student did like a fiction from China, so she can get all of it. And the finding was very interesting. She was trying to figure out the different role, their power relationship a little bit, and then how they talk. I think that's interesting. Okay, so here, one corpora is this one, and the other one is this one. They do have the interface for you guys to search directly and then to visualize the outcome. Remember, so Sally earlier was talking about cleaning the text, right? And then we talk about POS tagging, that they do things. For standard annotation, we can, here, POS tagging. Parsing. Parsing means, remember the grammar tree. That's the parsing. Okay. Parsing. Semantic. So, for example, the bank and the bank, different meaning. So maybe we need to know which one is which. Pragmatic. Would you please pass me the salt? It's one type of pragmatic, right? It doesn't mean yes or no. It means I need a service, right? Phonetic and prosodic. This is more spoken, right? Phonetic. How the word is. So for example, if we're talking about American English, British English, Australian English, we need this because same word pronounced differently. This one is more like intonation. Okay, and these are regular annotations. If we're talking about L1, yes, we do a lot of these. However, and nowadays there are tools for this, but sometimes it's difficult for L2 learners because maybe their grammar is not right. Then the parser cannot figure out. If parser cannot figure out, part of speech may not be correct. If the pronunciation is wrong, the phonetic, what's that called? Speech to text may not be able to transcribe the word. Things like that. So there are many, many problems. So I jumped it. That's the content. That's the accuracy rate. It's kind of low. It's kind of low. So that's why most people like to use written corpus. Okay? Written corpus because it's written, it's done. Okay. And the other thing, error tagging. Tagging the errors in learner corpus. So for example, if you collect students writing, you may want to say, oh, this is an error, this is an error, this is an error. So actually there are ways, there are rules written for finding errors, like Grammarly, right? It used to be, well, I think still, rule-based statistical and these days AI, but it's still statistical, large model to collect, to identify the errors. And still it's not 100%, but people don't want to use it because right now these days we have we have a lot of data, and then we only have 1, 2, 3 researchers plus I don't know how many RAs that we can annotate the data. Okay, so this is a little bit problematic, but I would say as a teacher, it's really useful. If I am able to annotate to find out what the problem that students usually have, I can create better pedagogical materials for me. Teacher has some kind of instinct, right? Let's say I teach presentation skills in mechanical engineering department. First, second years, I was like, what kind of errors did I make, right? I'm waiting. And then for each year, they have like 40 students. Then we collect their recordings for pronunciation practice. And then I listen to them and I start realizing, oh, they make interesting errors that probably English department students don't make. So they always say technology. That's not technology. They are using orange, but it's technology. Did you hear the difference? Or when a word is too long, they just read the first part. And that makes me feel like, oh, because I mean, for English departments, English major students, we don't make this kind of mistakes. We can pronounce it wrong, but we don't just cut it. And they just decided to cut it. So it's not just about whether their grammar is right or wrong. It's even, how to say that, more basic than that. That I know what my standard would be. So for the first class, so every year, almost every year, I have new TAs. TAs will be like, okay, so are we listening to fluency? I'm like, no. You don't need to listen for fluency because they won't speak too fast. Are we listening to the intonation of the sentence? No, because they're not there yet. No matter what they say, it's this bad. So we listen for pronunciation errors. That's it. Things like that. Okay. Yes, it's one more time. It's tedious, but it's beneficial. Okay, and here are different methods for analyzing learner corpus. I think this part is quite important. So if you're interested in this, you can go to page 290. In the chapter, they talk about 3 methods. First one, computer-aided error analysis, like we talked about a little bit earlier, right? So for example, if you want to, okay, in my PhD years, at the time we still have it. It's called Criterion. Criterion developed by ETS, and then it's similar to Grammarly, but then it's not like what you can just register online and use it. Okay, and then we use Criterion to annotate errors in learner Corpora, and then we get the number, we retrieve the numbers, and then we do the stats. Okay. So, for example, right now you can use Grammarly. However, you just need to validate like how accurate Grammarly is on your corpus. Okay, so we can talk about that if you're interested. So, computer-aided error analysis. You're looking for how many errors, what type of errors that students usually make throughout maybe a certain period of time. Or you can compare between different genres, for example. The second one, contrasted interlanguage analysis. So you are comparing learner language with native language or comparing different learner varieties. So the first one, let's say there's a prompt. Both L1 and L2 learners write on the same prompt. And then you compare. Same prompt, okay? The second one, different learner varieties. For example, they all write on the same prompt, but their L1 is different. So we have Japanese, Taiwanese, that's too bad, and then we write on the same prompt. So different L1, same L2, and see what's going on. That's the second one. Contrasted interlanguage. Then that's interlanguage, right? Because maybe they may use it differently. Okay, it is used to identify non-standard forms as well as instances of overuse or underuse. Overuse, use too much. Underuse, they don't use it. For example, certain grammar is too difficult for L2 learners, so most of them don't use it. Then how can you find it? You need to design a prompt good enough so they should be able to, in the writing, they should use that grammatical rules, structure, but then maybe you don't find it in L2. You compare L1 and L2 writing. and then probably you don't find out too. Things like that. Okay. And the third one, integrated contrastive model, is to do both of them at the same time. So depending on how much you want to do. I think these two are very interesting. I used to do this one for a corpus study. I think I did something with learner varieties, but I cannot remember now. So these are I think these are interesting. If you can find Corpora that's already made, and then you just need to do the analysis, that'll be great. Okay. For this part, you do need some kind of stats to help. So they talked about multifactorial statistics instead of just simple frequency comparisons. Remember the t-tests? That's the simple comparisons. Because you are trying to see, because you're trying to prove something, and then you need more stats about it. Then that's why you need the bigger corpus. You already saw these. These are the corpora that you can use. And then, wait, let me see. FCANDET. This is also one corpora from Cambridge. This one is also useful. For learner corpora, for learner corpus research, actually there's a journal. It's about learner corpus. It's about analyzing learner language. In the future, we still hope, mega databases, we do want a lot of data. And the problem is that, it's difficult to find, let's say, 3 countries, 3 teachers teaching the same prompt. We can try, but it's difficult. And then, these days, we do have increased diversity because we're getting, I would say that it's getting easier to collect, but that it's still difficult to collaborate. Yeah. Okay, and then the last one, annotated, automated analysis tools is getting even more popular. When I was doing my PhD, most of it, I have to write script for it to get more difficult stuff. But I think these days, like income are better. So nowadays it's getting better, but it's not automated enough yet, because like for L2 learners, they may make mistakes, and then the tagging tools may get wrong, things like that. Okay. So that's about learner Corpora. Any questions, any comments, anything you want to ask? Are you interested? I would suggest, like each chapter they give you the representative study, right? So if the title interests you, go take a look. That's one thing. They also shows the tools and resources, tools in the back. And also for the reading. I would say the representative ones are really good. Like they chose good ones for you. And, oh yeah. So for example, tools and resources, complete lexical tutor in the last paragraph here. Complete lexical tutor. This one is very useful if you cannot write a script, but you want, for example, vocabulary profile, meaning, whether users use high-level words or low-level words. This is something you can use. Do you want to collect the learner reports? Too much work? Yes, too much work. Okay. And then let me show you the PowerPoint that we made in 2022. We attended the AILA conference in Malaysia, and then at the time we were presenting this article. So we went, so I want to show you the PowerPoint slide that we did at that time. And then so today I am going to just briefly talk about the background, and then you guys we will do some activity, so you guys will figure out important things in here. Okay. In this study, we mainly look at, remember we talked about several things that we can investigate in a corpus, right? We talked about engrams, remember this? Lexical bundles, phrase frames. So like the blank of the blank, something missing, right? So in this one, this article, we want to look at whether, for example, we want to look at the relationship between phrase frames and students' proficiency level. We want to see whether there's a connection. Okay. That's the goal of the study. Why do we want to do this? So we know that for academic success, students need to be able to write, right? And then for EFL students, exposure to the target language is often very limited. I would say no, probably not, but depending on the teachers, depending on the students. Teachers need to target specific feature that can quickly help students' proficiency level. Okay, think back in your writing class. What do your teachers teach to improve your writing? What kind of content do teacher specifically say? Besides, they ask you to write and give you feedback. What else do they do?
5 paragraphs.
Thank you. We talk about the 5-paragraph structure. What else? Think about your writing class. Mary, talk about your first-year freshman composition class.
For 8th grade.
Yes. Well, first language, second language, both are fine.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
When
Yeah.
I was learning Spanish as a second language in high school, it was easier to get to a higher level than I am with Mandarin right now because it just takes longer and I'm a very low writing level for Mandarin. But when we were learning Spanish as second language writing, it was a more basic writing structure that we were like taught to rely on.
Yes, because that's something that we, especially structure, if there's something that we can follow, then yes, we start from there. Then we can be creative later. Then that's what happened in your class.
In Spanish, it was more often write 3 paragraphs.
Yes, we start from 3 paragraphs, 5 paragraphs, and then move on. Yes. Different language, like in Chinese, we usually have 4 paragraphs. 起承转合. So we usually have 4 paragraphs. In English, it's 5 paragraphs. Anything else? But this study, they want to look at phrase frames only. So formulaic sequence, multiple word sequence believed to be stored and produced whole. So like these days, when you produce language, it's not just one word after one word, right? It's a chunk in your head. But then our chunks may be different from Mary's chunks. That's the difference between L1 and L2. So Mary's Chinese is still, I think it's vocab level right now.
Just about. Yes.
So like she can memorize 词汇, 词. That's not word, vocabulary, right? But then she's not chunks yet. Okay. And then if we remember, if we know more chunks in the language that you want to learn, it actually gives you more time, a little bit of more time to think about what you want to produce next. And that helps proficiency level. That helps with the production of the fluency, production fluency. Okay. It would be better if we have more chunks stored in our head. How do we know whether they are chunks or not? So for example, the blank of them, it's a very useful, common chunks. But it's discontinuous, meaning you can put on the something of, on the edge of, on the, Mary give me one, on the something of.
Brink.
Bring?
On the brink of.
Sorry.
Brink is like edge.
Okay, good. So, but what you guys would think? Actually, the first one I had was on the table. But then, that's...
On the table of.
It's like, it's not,
specific table.
right. Of what, you know, then maybe that's not that common. On the edge of it, it could be literal, it also could be metaphorical, yes.
On the face of.
On the face of, yes, okay. So, why do we want to look at phrase frames? It's because probably it's more beneficial than lexical bundles, because lexical bundles are very fixed. Like on the other hand, there's no other way to write it, right? Only on the other hand. And then the limited research looked at the proficiency level differences with the use of phrase frames. These are the studies that look at phrase frames used in L2 English academic writing. Okay, so you can see different articles and then sequence of length of 3 word, 4 word, or 5 word. Source means different, I think that's the most important for you guys, different corpora to look at. And then they look at whether it's, for example, L1, L2, or proficiency level differences. And then to see whether there's a difference between the use of phrase frames in different levels or different L1s or different other things. And especially, here are 3 terms. So if the proficiency level is higher, variability is higher, and predictability is lower. Okay, this is like, these specific terms are the things that we want to look at to identify, to investigate what it is like the use of phrase frames in different proficiency levels. So for this study, we look at 3 things: type and token count for 4 and 5 word P frames, variability, and then predictability. Okay, so these are the 3 research questions. Data. We collected the data from L1 Japanese undergrads. They are first-year students, and in their writing class, so they do have something like general English class. In their writing class, they wrote argumentative essay. The argumentative essay is about privacy issue. Students write 500 words, and they have 2 weeks to write it. And after that, each essay was graded by trained teachers, and then with a modified version of TOEFL rubric. So then you can see they group students into 2 levels because it's 5 scale, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if we take off all the 3, so we say 1, 2 is low level, and then 4 and 5 is high level. For each group, we have 157. And then you can see the word and mean are very, very similar. This is a very, very controlled situation. This usually doesn't happen at all. But then, because in this study, we want to make sure the corpora are very comparable. So then we figured this out. We designed it in this way. Okay, and then for the P frames, we look at, so we get 4 to 5 word P frames. And then the extraction criterion is that it has to happen in more than 16 texts. So for each one is 157, right? Because we don't want to make it like, oh, something is used so many times, but then it only happened in 1 text. Then that's just one person's writing style, not all of them. That's why we need a range. So that's about 10%. And then for the analysis, if we see like on the other hand, and then on the other hand, so we just take this one for analysis. So we don't look at shorter ones. Okay, I have kind of introduced the study. Now it's your task. So we have 3 research questions. So for each group, you guys are going to answer the research questions. So let's talk about the questions. So question number 1 is, do type and token count for 4 and 5 word P frames differ across proficiency levels? If so, in what ways? So then I'm going to show you guys. So here, usually when we hear about type and token, we're referring to words, right? Individual words. How many word count, for example. But here, type and token refer to the number of the use of phrase frames. So here we are talking about the criteria, right? The phrase frames extraction. After you extract it, thank you very much. Yes, they normalize it to 500 words. Why did they choose the number 500? Because if you look at page 3, table 1, the mean of 2 corpora is around 500. Okay, so it will be not really useful if you say, I don't know, 10,000 words. Good. So here, Eileen mentioned these are range, frequency, and normalization. These are actually important when you're dealing with corpus. Okay, so next time, please, when you're in a group, talk to each other to make sure the answers are correct. Thank you. Next one. So what's the results for RQ1?
That high-level writers use phrase frames with higher frequency than low-level writers, and they also especially use 5-word phrase frames more frequently.
Anything else?
Also, type count differences were more significant than token count differences.
Right.
That's
okay. Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. So. Wait, I'm sorry. Did you finish?
Yes.
Okay,
go
thank
ahead.
you. So here, in general, right? In general, we found that the higher level students use higher frequency P frames, and then 5-word is more frequently used, and also type count difference is more significant than token count difference. Okay, and then can we go to page 5, table 2? So page 5, table 2 is the general finding so far. So you can see that higher level students' types are higher than lower level students, right? And then one thing I want to mention is that how do they know whether 2 groups are different or not? What's the statistical measurement for this? How do we know? It's in the table. I assure you, it's in the table. Your answer is in front of your eyes, just depending on whether you see it or not. My question is, here we said that, oh, something is more significant than the others, right? How do they know? They look at one thing for comparison to see how big it is, how significant, how much more significant it is.
Cohen's-d.
Yes, Cohen's-d in the very end, okay? So if you go back to the method, then you will see that they use Cohen's-d to look at which one is more significant. That's how the third one, type count differences were more significant than token count differences. That's why you can say it. Okay, that's why. It's not because p-value, blah, blah, blah. No. This one is about Cohen's-d. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, question number 2. Let me read the question for you. Wait. Question number 2. Does variability for 4 and 5 word frames differ across language proficiency levels? If so, in what ways? Okay, so we want to look at the diversity and distribution of the fillers. Okay, and how do they calculate?
The research conducted at for the rate short. And when the score is much closer to 1, it means much higher variability.
Why? Why? Give me an example. I know why, but you tell me why. How does type token ratio calculated?
Right, divided.
So you have the type of and the token, right? Token is total numbers of use. So let's say a frame is used 5 times. It is something to 5 times. In this 5 times, 4 times is the same one. so then it's 0.8, right? But if the same one only have, like each one of them only use once, that's just 0.2. Right, so when it's closer to 1, wait, variability. Oh, it means how many, right? So if it's 5 type, different ones. So let's say if we have, okay, a phrase happened 5 times. If you have 5 fillers, then that's closer to 1. If you only have 1 filler, then that's just 0.2. Everyone get that? One more time. Do I need to say it one more time? Type token ratio for variability. Okay, and then what's the results?
The results show that higher level corpus is lower than lower level corpus. As you can see in table 3, in fixed pillars, HLC uses more types, because then compared to LLC, because they use certain words, certain fillers for that. However, in highly variable percentage, it's 59% versus 42%. So HLC uses more certain fillers.
Yes, okay. So for this chart, we start from the left. For variability, we got this standard from other papers. So we say if it's fixed, that means the TTR rate is greater, less than 0.3, like that. So these are from other papers. And then we look at how many, what's the type token ratio from each level, let's say this way. Then we found that higher level students actually used more fixed phrase frames, meaning they are using it in a very consistent way. Okay. And let me ask you, what do you think about this result? Do you think, I don't know what you think. What do you think? Because when I started this research with them, I was like, I thought higher level students will use more variability. Like they will use more different, various fillers for frames. What do you think? But the result is actually opposite. I understand, like for us, we try to memorize some good phrases, right? Or some, so for example, in addition, or those important phrases that you can use for good writing. That's what I asked you from the beginning. And then it's interesting to see that I think one thing I could say from this is that they have a higher, not higher, but like more mature understanding of the use of language. So like, for example, we saw it on the blank of, then I said on the edge of, right? For that, but the first thought was on the table of. For me, one is literal, and then on the edge of is more like what I see in readings, basically. So my understanding of this phrase can be a little different, and that will transfer to what I do when I write. If you don't, for example, have the context, have the exposure of English reading materials enough, probably you are not able to write things like that. Okay. So I think one thing is, if you have more exposure, or if you have here it only says higher level, but higher level means the writing is higher level. We don't really know other scores, like listening, writing, speaking, right? We only know the writing score here, so we don't really know. Second thing, I'm thinking that probably students are getting the phrase frames from the prompt, the writing prompt itself. So higher level students are are smart in a way to use the phrase frames from the prompt. Okay, they actually mention something like that. Continue, and also this one.
It is higher level writers prefer to use more frequent fillers and native type selection.
Okay. Oh, from this page, I think it's interesting. Look at this. So higher level students, lower level students, and then you have the TTR difference, right? TTR difference means TTR minus this one minus this one. So you get this. Okay. And then you can see from all of them, lower level students have a higher TTR, meaning they use very different. So this actually means they have so many different fillers. Because look at the type token here. This phrase, this P phrase happened 27 times. And there are 25 different types of fillers. This one. But then this one, only 23, and only about half of it, or less than half, say 60%, right? So that means higher level students are using it in a more consistent way. Okay. For surveillance camera, this one is from the prompt. So probably student can copy directly. But with the blink of, this could be very creative. But then somehow they use it in a more consistent way. Okay, so that's how we get this. Thank you very much. Research question number 3. Let me read the question. Does predictability for 4 and 5 word difference differ across proficiency levels? If so, in what ways?
Okay. So for research question, the definition and reason for using is on page 4.3. That so for the predictability of the phrase frame, it refers to how the predictable the filler in the variable sort of the various frame is. And if most writers use the same filler, the first frame is higher predictable. And if many different fillers are used, and is less predictable. So the study used in Corpora to measure the predictability because in law consists both the number of the filler and the statistic distribution of the filler, so that the in-law can provide more accurate measure of the predictability.
Okay, entropy. It's called entropy. Okay, next page.
So how was it calculated? It's on page 4 and 7. So the predictability was measured using entropy based on the frequency distribution of the fillers in each first frame. So the first frame is on this table. So lower entropy means the higher predictability.
So lower means higher. I know it's difficult, but lower number is higher predictability. Is it? Okay. Okay, let's see the results.
The result in a study of chosen research questions that the answer is yes. Predictability differs across proficiency levels. Higher proficiency writers produce PFS with the lower entropy, that's 0.7, than lower proficiency writers 0.76. That means that the higher proficiency writer is more predictable, and the lower entropy indicates greater predictability of fillers in the phrase frame slot. And that's the table. Average entropy is higher is 0.7 and the lower is 0.76. Predictable PE types that higher is 22 and the lower is 9. That means the higher proficiency students have more predictable friends patterns. And the predictable PE tokens that higher is 562. The lower is 257. That means that represents that the higher proficiency students more frequently use predictable PFS.
Okay. Where did you get this number?
Page 7, that's table 5.
Okay, so you chose the predictable
Predictable
PE is what? PF? Phase frame instead of PE.
types and tokens.
你就是 PESP。
And you have the high as 22 and then low as 9 years. So you got a token 532 and 2 times. Okay.
Oh, it is PF.
Right, it should be PF. Okay. So here it means, can we look at the, I know this part is a little bit difficult. Let me see, do you have, yes. Let's finish this one, the example. On page 8.
Example of predictability difference that friend the right privacy. HLC, the right to privacy is more frequent and convention. LLC is the right of privacy. That shows higher proficiency writers tends more conventional French patterns in academic English.
Yes, thank you. Okay, let's look at page 8 together, 5.3.1, predictability, individual item differences. And they chose the phrase frame, the right blank proficiency. For higher level learners, they chose to use more the right to proficiency, privacy. And then for lower level, they write the right of privacy. And then on the second paragraph, we also did a COCA searches. Do you see that? We did COCA search for the right to privacy is more than the right of privacy. You see that? You see the numbers. So this shows that actually higher level, that's why I meant by like a little bit mature use of language, because they know better. But also they also point out that maybe this phrase is also from the prompt as well. So students may just copy from there. But also I would say that for higher level students, they understand the prompts better probably, so they can get the information quickly by looking at the use of from the prompt. Okay. So here are the 3 questions, RQs, and then you see different. I asked you to do it this way because I want to make sure you understand those 3 different RQs and then how they are being calculated. Now, let me ask you this question. When you answer these 3 questions, when you made the slides that I asked you to do, which sections of the articles did you look for answers? Which sections? In general, which sections? Results for sure, right? Because I asked you the results in the study. What else? Where else did you look at? Methods. Right, I hope you look at methods, right? Because then I asked you how it was calculated, what's the definition, so you know when you are reading a paper, If you want to copy the paper, if you want to use the same way to analyze your corpus, then these are the two sections that you need to look at. Okay,